since the second half, really, how much they've really struggled. Charged with finding some stability from this.
Welcome back to the next episode of the journey of a grassroots rugby coach. This week's guest is Dan Cottrell. Dan is the editor of Rugby Coach Weekly. He's also a practising RFU Level 3 coach and coach educator. He coaches in the Bristol Bears DPP program. He's the assistant coach with Bristol University Women's team, and is a coach mentor at Broad Plain RFC. He has also coached Swansea schools under 15 and recently held roles with Young Ospreys Academy, and also assistant coach for Wales women's team at the 2010 World Cup. He's also previously played for both Bath and Bristol. During our chat, we spoke about making sure that us as coaches allow learning to happen during training sessions. We also chatted about making sure your persona that you display as a coach matches the message that you're portraying, as well as player empowerment and being the best version of yourself. I really took a lot out of this chat with Dan. I hope you do as well. He's very generous with his time. He also runs his own podcast, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, as well as a link to Rugby Coach Weekly if you feel you want to subscribe and get some information that he puts out every week. Please feel free, as always, to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, give us a review, pass this on to any coach or player that you think may benefit from listening to it. Also, make sure you subscribe to get all our updates. If you've got any guests you want me to reach out and have a chat to about grassroots coaching, feel free to drop me a line and I'll reach out to them. I've got a heap more guests lined up to come up in the coming weeks, so stay tuned, but sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation with Dan Cottrell.
Inevitably, I mean, it's a book's worth of lessons, but the big rocks, I think, would be the difference between performance and learning. Coaching session, you can probably improve someone's performance as the session goes on. They can become a bit better at something, especially if they repeat it enough times. However, that doesn't mean they've learned it. Learning happens over a very long period of time. It is messy. There's all sorts of connections that they make, they lose, they forget. So don't think you've taught it in week 1. They're going to remember it in week 6. You've got to keep coming back to it. You've got to keep reminding them of what's happened.
Yeah. But he can't find it. That's a mighty shot. A mighty Leicester.
All right, mate. Well, why don't we make a start and we'll get going. So, thanks for joining me, Dan. Just for our listeners that may not know who you are, who are you, where are you, and what's your involvements with the grassroots game?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. I'll give you a short history. There's nothing better than talking about yourself. Or it can be a bit embarrassing, but in simple terms, I'm editor of Rugby Coach Weekly, which is a website, books, newsletters around coaching rugby. It's aimed at most levels. I mean, I'm sure one or two people at the top level might pass over my stuff as well, but it's aimed at coaches who are looking for solutions, who will say come up with problems which they can't necessarily answer for themselves. And I've got a great team of people who contribute. And one of the main things that I enjoy about the job I do is listening and getting different views and ways to do coaching, and through rugby in particular. And it's very easy to have one view and let that be the only view. So hopefully I allow a range of views to come across. Obviously, they've got to be safe and they've got to make some sense. And I'm quite happy to bust a few myths along the way, and also to be told that I'm wrong. I'm definitely not always right. And in coaching, I don't think anyone can say that they are right. I just genuinely do not think that you can say that one specific thing has made the difference. It's such a range of environmental, psychological factors which make up the player that a coach will make a difference, but they're not always certain that what they've just said has made the difference or what they said 6 weeks ago. So that's my background there. Currently, I am coaching 3 or 4 roles at the moment, lucky to be very heavily involved with coaching at grassroots. So I'm with the University of Bristol Women's team. So I'm assistant coach there. I am with the Bristol Bears under 14s to under 16s program. So working with the top players in the group and also looking at the aspiring players as well. So that is very interesting, looking at the journeys involved there. I am also working with a local Bristol club called Broad Plain and just give a bit of coach mentoring and a bit of coaching as well. So that's been good fun too. So I think that's most of the coaching I'm doing at the moment, but also I'm doing some coach ed as well, which is also interesting because it allows you, and we talked before we started recording about asking questions. It allows you to ask questions of coaches about what you're doing. And quite often they come back to you with something which you've not necessarily considered, or something that you're saying isn't necessarily making the difference to them. So you might need to change what you do. So that is roughly where I am at the moment. And I'm living in Bristol, which is a great rugby city too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. I follow the Bears a little bit. I just like the way that they play under Pat Lam. I think he's phenomenal. So, mate, let's get into the questions. What got you into coaching in the first place?
Well, I think being an older brother, the oldest of 3, you tend to be bossy. So that could be one reason. There's a book that my father got given to him back in the 70s by his dad. And it was about rugby. It was a sort of book which had stories from ex-rugby players, tales from the changing room, tales from the bar, great games. But one of the things it had in it was 6 of the best tries of their day. For instance, nobody's old enough to remember this, but Richard Sharp scored a great try for England. And it had 6 pictures of the start of the try to the finish. It had the Hancock try for England against Scotland. Again, these are tries that nobody of a certain age will ever have heard of. But I was absolutely fascinated by those pictures. And then later on in the book, it also, for some unknown reason, it had a coach had put these X's and O's approximately of the play. So at the age of 10, 11, I thought this was amazing. And I absolutely loved it. And I wasn't a good rugby player. I got better. And so I was drawing these things as well. I was absolutely fascinated by it. So when I sort of got better at rugby, and I played to a relatively decent level. I mean, didn't break it through into the top level, but I played to a relatively decent level. I was also very lucky to be coached by some very good coaches, and was playing rugby with some very good coaches. So at the time, I was coached by Dave Allred, Brian Ashton, and I was playing with, albeit they were in the first team, I was in the second team. So there was Andy Robinson, Richard Hill, Mike Catt, Nigel Redman, Martin Haag. I mean, I've left out lots, but these are all people who were thinking about the game, thinking deeply about the game, and all this rubbed off on me. And so I was fascinated by that, and I wanted to sort of share that with other people. And so I started off as an accountant, but then went into teaching economics and business studies, but inevitably got stuck with or put with rugby teams. And I tried to be a rugby coach with them. And I'd probably say that 10% of what I did was effective, and 90% was completely, well, I'm going to sort of say 90% was well-intentioned, may have had some benefits, but it certainly wasn't the way I coach now. I was lucky that I accidentally coached some good stuff, not knowing why. I like to play games. I didn't tend to shout too much. I'm quite quiet, and definitely accidentally, I probably asked more questions than number of coaches at the time, but I didn't know why, and there was I can't take any credit for doing it. I'm very lucky because I went on some courses, passed through level 2 into level 3 quite quickly, just because I enjoyed it. But it didn't necessarily make me a better coach, but it did give me more opportunities to learn, to be with other coaches, find out more. And so, I mean, I really started coaching properly in about 1994. So it's a hell of a long time ago. What's that? Coming up to nearly 28 years.
Yeah.
Doing the maths.
Yeah.
I can see. If anyone's looking at the video, there's both of us doing the maths in our heads. You can see it. You can see. Yeah, that's right.
I should remember that was the year I was married, so I should remember that year.
All right, okay.
I like how you said that you tried to coach, and I think in the first year, if we all reflect back, we all tried. Like, it was just something that we tried to do, and like you said, probably very little of it rubbed off. And I think I'm like you, mate. If I look back at some of my old sessions now, I just cringe and just go, "Oh, Jesus, what was I thinking?" Like, but that was the way we were coached too. You know, you just progress it through, and thank God we don't do that anymore.
But it's interesting that I reflect back on some of the coaching I had when I was from about 1987 onwards, and another guy, chap called Keith Lyons. I was at Exeter University, and he came along to coach, and everyone went, "What the hell?" I mean, poor Keith unfortunately died recently, but he was out in Australia for a long time. But he came with such a different way of thinking about coaching. It made a massive difference on the way I thought about coaching, though I didn't realize it at the time. So, and also a number of the coaching experiences I had, the coaches didn't realize it, but they were actually coaching quite well. Yeah. They thought they were coaching one way, they were coaching another way, and yet still being effective, even if they were probably getting a bit overfraught with Auckland grids and smashing into pads. But another thing which I reflect on what you've just said is I tried to coach, and actually what I should be saying these days is I was allowing learning to happen. And that's probably where I'm now trying to get myself to. Not saying the game is the teacher, because the game's not the teacher. The game is a medium to allow learning to happen. And as a coach, you are creating as many opportunities for that to happen, whether it's through direct instruction, saying, stop, you need to actually put your hand here. And sometimes that is, you have to do it. You have to say, you cannot scrummage like that. You have to change the angle of your knees, or your back is the wrong shape. You just have to say it. It's not you'll discover it through 20 scrums. No, you'll get hurt. So let's just help you not get hurt.
Yeah. No, then that's a good point, is getting that balance right between I have to tell you this, and then letting them, some things you can let them find out as they go along, but some things you got to pull them up on. Yeah, that's a really good point, mate. No, thanks for that. That's awesome. What's been some of the biggest heartbreaks you've had or disappointments as a coach? And the reason I ask this is because we've all had disappointments and heartaches, and for a young coach, or someone starting out on their coaching journey, that can sometimes be the difference between, no, that's it, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to do this, or like most the guys that are still in the game, we just sort of rack it up to experience and become better for it. So if we can let coaches know that you are going to have days where you walk away and go, well, that was rubbish. That was rubbish by me. Nothing got achieved. these are the, disappointments we have, but it never lasts very long. There's always the next challenge, So
I know you sent that question to me in advance, and I've been thinking a lot about it. And I've had plenty of disappointments, times when I think I could have done a better job. And if you, when I reflect back on it, if it's one moment, then there's probably that you can pick out things where you could have said something better.
Yeah.
You could have said something which was different, and it doesn't necessarily, you don't know it at the time. I think sometimes early on I was a bit flippant, probably a bit jokey in quite tough situations instead of sort of taking it straight on. Also, maybe what you don't realize is your persona is what the one that you give over is different to the one you think you give over.
Yeah.
I remember going to a conference and Nigel Redman, who I played with, Ollie Redman, he said to me afterwards, when we were talking about some of the courses he'd been on, he said, well, Dan, I went on a course where they made me smile more. I said, yeah, because what happened was that I think I was being empathetic and talking in a good way, which I was, but my face was giving me a completely different message.
Yeah.
And so I had to change that. And sometimes you're quite surprised that the message you think you're giving, you say, I was so enthusiastic. No, you're not. You were bossy, you were over aggressive. And that is surprising. And that's why I've done plenty of podcasts over the last 3 or 4 years. And one thing which comes through from a number of people is that, and I've got this mentor, and it's made a massive difference. So if you can find somebody, a critical friend is sometimes what they call it, who can actually pull you up and say, yeah, you got this wrong for this reason, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Then that's good. So addressing your question specifically, I think that every time you lose, you're heartbroken. And you might say to yourself, it's a learning experience. Yet there's a little piece of you is saying, I've got something wrong here. And in part, it's personal, but in part, it's the people you're with. They're also a bit heartbroken. Yeah. Now, for some of them, it is the pinnacle of their career to date, and they will be very disappointed. It might be, I can remember a dad coming up to me after one semi-final, and he said, why did you take my son off? And he was our best player, our captain. Well, I took him off because the other scrum half needed to have some game time, and he can't be in a semi-final and not have some game time. Now, that dad and that boy at that time were very disappointed, and I understand that. But equally, the boy who hadn't he come on, he would have been disappointed. Now, the truth of it is, probably we would have won the game. Not that the guy who came on wasn't good, but he wasn't the captain, and we made a couple of decisions that lost us the game, and we could have got to the final. The final would have been at the National Stadium. Yeah, I think back to that. I think back to a time when I took a boy off in the middle of a game, and I said to him at the time, well, we need to save you for future games, because he was one of our best players. And he said subsequently he felt that he was under pressure to win games for us. And that wasn't my intention, but that's how it came across.
That's how it came across, yeah.
Now, I've certainly said some stupid things as well in my time and got it wrong. And I thought, why the hell did I say that? If I just thought a bit more or reflected. I mean, some people will just talk and talk and talk. And to a certain extent, it sounds like I can do that at the moment. And you tie yourself up in knots. and then you spend your time apologizing. So I quite like the people who can say something and just walk away from it. That would be good.
Yeah.
If I could do that. So, but the thing I was going to say, I'm heartbreaking. The most heartbreaking moment I think was in rugby was watching my eldest son's last game of rugby when he was. They had a very good team. They were in the semi-final of the local schools cup. I was asked to referee because they needed not one of the teachers to referee. And my son was on the bench and he never came on. And I sort of knew that he might not play rugby again. And I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. And they lost the game and he never got on. And the coach probably thought he was justified by not bringing him on because he was the 16th player, but he wasn't. He was probably, in terms of the playing strength, the 21st or 22nd player. And I've always felt really bad about them. I don't know how bad he feels about it, but I felt bad. And I think that's probably shaped me that I will try and bring players on, even if we're in a situation where it's a tight game and we could lose it. I haven't got it right all the time, but that's a heartbreaking moment. So in answer to, again, the reason why you asked the question is a young coach will have setbacks. We talk about journeys. I mean, if you watch, I don't know if you have the same sort of Simon Cowell type Britain's Got Talent, where you are, Australia's Got Talent. But
Yeah, I don't watch it, but we have it, yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of people talk about journeys.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a platitude, but it is a journey. There's a quote which I've got from Rick Shuttleworth. I can never remember it, so I've got it on a piece of paper in front of me. Learning skills is not the process of repeating a solution; it's repeating the process of finding solution. So we're just always, if we're always on a journey, we're going to fall off the road or we're going to find another path. So just keep going forward. The most magical thing is the fact that you allow 12, 15, 20 players to play a game that they may not have been able to play or give them the chance. And that's why the heartbreaking moments are probably worth it. If there was no light and shade, it would be boring.
Yeah, absolutely, it would be. But and I think too, if we don't have the heartbreak and the disappointment, it makes the good moments not feel so good.
Mm.
So what's
you got to have some you got to have some jeopardy. You've got. I mean, that's why sport's so brilliant. The fact that you may drop the ball at the moment. I mean, I play a lot of golf now. Just as it's fascinating being coaching it, and it's jeopardy every time you stand over the ball. I mean, anyone who plays golf with me will know that is, you don't know quite where it's going to go, and it's just amazing. It's the most amazing feeling having that, and when you have that success, then I don't know. There's some technical medical term for what gets released, but it just feels amazing.
Yeah, and that sort of leads into that next bit about some of the highlights, or the greatest moments that we've had as coaches. I think they always outweigh the bad moments.
So what's been your sort of, what when you think, oh, that just makes me feel really warm that happened?
I think a lot of it is because I do a lot of stuff with like the under 14 to under 16 representative teams here, and when you see them away from training and they walk up to you in the street, or their parents walk up to you and they say how well that they've seen their son improve or their daughter improve, or that type of, or you see them, like we go to a Melbourne Rebels game here and you see a couple of boys you coached a few years ago and they still walk across the crowd to say hello to you. I think they're the moments, like away from, and it's sort of away from the pitch that, or you get a call out of the blue from a guy you coached a few years ago, and they just want to have a chat about, this has come up. What do you reckon? But all with those connections that we make away from the game, I think is pretty priceless in some of it.
Definitely, and I think we talk about making connections with your players. And I've seen coaches do it in a way where they know they need to, but it's just not natural.
Yeah.
And they're not being themselves and not allowing the players to be themselves, but they're making the effort. So I think it's important we do. But if you can make those connections, it's just amazing. I mean, more recently with the Bristol Bears guys, I've just trying to talk to them and find out a little bit more about them. And they come back with, and they're hilarious, of course, but they love the fact that you're taking interest in them.
Yeah.
And one boy, I sort of misquoted. What an arse I was for saying this. He made two mistakes, and I tried to quote Oscar Wilde at him about you can lose one parent, and that's some. And I misquoted him. Anyway, next week he came back to me and said, "Well, actually, the quote you were looking for was this." And I thought, brilliant. I mean, the fact that he's cheeky enough to go away, to come back to me, but also to look it up was fantastic. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, hang on, mate. I've just had No, that's really good, mate. What about some of the lessons that you've learnt along the way that that you can share with the listeners that can help the coaches as they go through their journey? There's probably a lot, because knowing what you do and the amount of time, but some of the big rocks that they call them, the stuff that we learn as we wander through our coaching career.
Well, inevitably, I mean, it's a book's worth of lessons, but the big rocks, I think, would be the difference between performance and learning. Coaching session, you can probably improve someone's performance as the session goes on. They can become a bit better at something, especially if they repeat it enough times. However, that doesn't mean they've learned it. Learning happens over a very long period of time. It is messy. There's all sorts of connections that they make, they lose, they forget. So don't think you've taught it in week 1, they're going to remember it in week 6. You've got to keep coming back to it. You've got to keep reminding them of what's happened.
Yeah.
You've got to, the other one is, don't forget the internal logic of the game. And what I mean by that is, games in training are excellent in many ways. They need to be used at the right times, but you need to relate everything back to if you're trying to help the player develop in the game that they're playing, say, for instance, they're playing rugby, the try line's in front of you, you've got to pass backwards. Those are 2 parts of the internal logic. So if you play a 360 game of rugby, that's good for various different things. But if that's all you play in the session, then the players are going to not come out with the same outcomes if you don't get them to play to a try line which is in front of them, and still have to pass the ball backwards.
Yeah.
So I would say the 2 big rocks are learning happens over a long period of time. You need to keep coming back and reminding the players. So at the start of every session, it is always good to try and remind them or help them to remind them of what's going on. And the second thing is that within that, the session doesn't mean that they've learned it. And the second big rock is keep coming back to what the game is about.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using games. And there's a number of myths out there. There's a myth that you should only speak for 30 seconds in a training session before you set them going. Sometimes you're going to have to speak for longer. You're going to have to explain things.
Yeah.
Don't make that time lots and lots of questions. Ask maybe you can ask for a short question to check for understanding. But if sometimes ask a question and don't necessarily expect them to come back with the answer now, how do we create space in this game?
Mm-hmm.
They may not come up with the answer, or they may not be able to come up with the answer now. And you say, look, I'm just going to leave it there. Let's discuss it at the end. Let's discuss it next week. What solutions? And let's see if we can change our minds. There's no one answer that they need to have. So questions are good. There's no doubt about that. Giving empowerment to the players is good. But sometimes you're the coach, you're the teacher. You need to lead. You need to say, this is the direction we're going. This year, I empowered one of my teams to run their own warm-ups, and we discussed it, and I said, all right, you set them out. And after about 3 weeks, I said, I think you want me to run the warm-ups. I said, yes, please, can you do the warm-ups? Because they felt they didn't have the direction or the knowledge to do it. Now, probably if we'd done 4 or 5 weeks of me running the warm-ups with a little bit of empowerment, and then I handed it back over to them, they could have done it for themselves. So you need to empower at the right moments with the right props in place, the right structures, the right scaffolding to allow them to take control. But you can't just say, take control and sit back. You have to do it in the right way. So there's an unorganized unorganized. That's what my son says, unorganized. And I tell him off. That's a disorganized big rocks. That's some big rocks and some tumbling little rocks next to them.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's good. What about let's talk about coach development as opposed to coach education. Of course, we have all our we do our accreditations and we do all that stuff. But to me, there's more to being a coach than just sitting in the classroom for 2 days and getting your level 1s, your level 2s. And I know you do a lot of work around that coach accreditation. So what's your advice for coaches around upskilling themselves and that coach development?
I think coach education and the accreditations and what the various bodies run are an important part of your development. If you don't do it, I think you miss out on, first of all, being part of the group.
Yep.
That of people. You get involved with the system. You understand how the system works. Also, the people you meet on the courses are very good. The coach educators, there's a very good chance that you're going to meet someone who's going to give you some mentoring, if only just over those 2 or 3 days. However, and the guys who run it, and I've known quite a few different people who've been in charge of these courses around the world. They know that they're very limited. You can't just turn up for 2 days and think you've cracked it. We talked a bit earlier about performance and learning. You can't learn it over those 2 days. So you've got to be keen to find out more. And the best way to learn about coaching is to coach. You can't coach unless you are you can't learn about coaching unless you're coaching. But you can't just coach and expect to learn. You have to have some reflection. You need to have somebody come in and tell you why it was different. And you have to be prepared to change your mind. I think the dangers are that you become beholden to a style of coaching, and you say, right, I coach through games and everything's going to be a game, or you coach through we need to get the fundamentals right first before we can move into games, or the players need to be fitter and stronger before we can actually move on with training. These things are all true in part, But what is your role as a coach? Is it about you? Is it about the players? Now, my mind is it's all about you. Everything's got to be about you. You've got to make yourself the best version of a coach that you can possibly be. You need to be the fittest, the strongest that you can be. You need to be the most well-read, because if you're that, then everyone will benefit from that. It's not because it's a massive ego trip. You've got to have some ego to be a coach. You can't stand up there and be, I don't like to be in front of people. You've got to be able to be happy to be in front of people, but you need to be happy to be in front of people, because that best version of you is going to be the best that those players are going to get. And what is the best version of you requires you to be constantly reflecting on your strengths and weaknesses. Building your strengths may be addressing some of those weaknesses, being prepared to adjust, but also being prepared to listen to the people in front of you and be empathetic. Now, on a coaching course, you will be put in a situation where coach, say, the pot passing, or coach a 2v1. So you coach 6-7 guys who you've met for a beer the night before, and you go through all the motions of setting out the exercise, asking the right questions, progression. This is good. The difference is that you'll be coaching people that you've met and known for a very long time, and they won't be intently listening to you or wanting to do exactly what you say. So you need to be able to adjust your behaviors to meet those needs at that time. So in terms of coach development, coach as many different teams as you possibly can. Learn from reflecting, watch other coaches, see what they do in terms of their delivery. Don't think that, I mean, we think we talked about Pat Lam either before the start or during the recording, and you go and watch Pat Lam coach. That's fantastic. You won't be Pat Lam with your under 14s, because that's completely different, and it seems so obvious. There's lockdown fantastic podcasts out there. Quite a lot of them, and I think you're trying to address this yourself by the podcast. Quite a lot of them are not necessarily addressing the issues that I've got 35 kids who turn up and they're all overexcited. I've got myself and 4 other coaches, 2 of whom have never played the game before. That's what I've got to deal with, and I've got to create something which looks roughly like a training session.
Yeah.
Well, that's crowd management to a certain extent. That is managing your resources, and if some rugby breaks out as well, well done you. Yeah. And I'm the best coaches I've seen like that. Remember a guy down at Hazelmere. He was a friend of mine from university, and I was helping out with another team, and I was watching him out of the corner of my eye, and I was so impressed with what he's doing. And we're chatting afterwards. He says, well, here I am working with Hazelmere under 8s. I know exactly what to do because my eldest son is under 13. So I've been through this, made the mistakes, I've come back, and I know that after 20 minutes, they're going to have their snacks. And I tell you what, that's their favorite bit.
Yeah.
And the way he involved the parents was fantastic, because he knew from bitter experience, and the coach development officers will say, I wish that you would stay in coaching. Now you're 2A to a coach, because now your son has gone through the system. You know how to coach this lot, but you're going to be lost. And you cannot say to mum or dad who's been coaching every Sunday for the last 7 years, right, give up another 3 or 4 years of your Sundays to, well, I've got my own kids to look after and run around for and transport to here and there.
And I think a really good point that we get that experience through like coaching our own kids and etc. etc. And I'll say to some coaches, go and watch the under-8s coach, herd cats.
Yes, exactly.
And then look at what he does, and you may be able to take some of what he's doing into your under-16 session, or your, because just like you said, it's crowd management and making sure they're all safe and connected, and so you can always take something away from somebody.
And even if you can see that you can watch their behaviors and you say, well, actually I do that and I can see why that's not working for me.
Yeah.
I mean, very simple things like standing with distractions behind you. The sun behind you, always looking into the sun, always be watching the distractions. Sometimes going down to their level, but sometimes going above their level.
Yeah.
To give a different message.
Yeah.
Sometimes targeting one or two players in order to make the rest of the group follow. Which is a way of, the under 8s are often led by 2 or 3. If you can get those 2 or 3 to right, we're going to set this up. Jason, can you put out the cones? And Rob, okay. So, what do you think the most important thing is to do here? And he won't say, let's go and have an ice cream. Which one's silly kid? I've asked that before, right? How can we improve the game? We can all go and have ice creams. And I'd lost the group.
Yeah.
So, I was there saying, I'm empowering them to do this. I'm going to give you one of the things I've used with younger kids. I give them a menu of not ice creams, but of choices in the games. I say, right, we're playing this game. I just want to change it a bit. Here are 3 things we could do differently. Which one do you want to choose? And I might say, make the pitch a bit wider, give the opposition an extra player, or if you're touched, then you have to pass the ball immediately. Which one do you want? And I could give them behavioural bias. I know which one I would choose, but which one do you want?
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, we want this one. Is that the one you chose? I said, yeah, that's the one I would have chosen. Or alternatively, they might say to me, oh, which one would you choose? I always think it's fun if we do the give one player to the opposition, because it never works. And they go, oh, yeah, we'll go with that one. I mean, kids have got recency works really well for them. What's your favourite game? Funny enough, it's the game they played last week.
Yeah.
It's not really their favorite game. If you actually listed it out, sat them in a room with a group psychologist working out, they probably say a different game was their favorite game. I often found their favorite game was the one with the funniest name.
Yeah.
We had a drill called Get Out of Here. It was a drill more than a game. I said, what game do you want to play? Get out of here. And so we said, oh, okay, fair enough, we'll do that then. So it was more like a drill sergeant than allowing them to play the game. So they will remember what the shiniest thing was rather than the best thing.
And that's a good point you say about it's usually the game they played last, because I'd notice even in like under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, even sometimes at the senior team, you'll play a game of touch footy or whatever, and then you break and you go, right, we're going to do a catch pass drill, blah blah blah, and you finish that drill and go back to the game, and they just keep doing the drill they've just done because that's what and you just go, no guys, that's not what so they remember that recency without going back to, like you said before, you got to keep going back to the well and just remember the other stuff that we have done. This is just a little add-on that we're giving you. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that also, because we found that with the Bristol Bears, we've had breakouts and we say looking at, let's improve our action on the ground because we've lost the ball a bit on the ground. So we've broken out in a game, done that, and we go back into the game, and the players all want to go to ground now.
Yeah.
I said, no, we don't want you to go to ground. We're just saying that if you go to ground, do this. And I think another thing that coaches will do is they'll solve a problem with an exercise. So we played a game, they're struggling with their 2v1s. So we'll break out and do some 2v1s, bring them back into the game. They're still struggling with 2v1s. Well, you don't solve a problem immediately and the players then solve it back in the game. And I still find it now. I will solve a problem for them. Think about this, but they may not get it this week. And another thing, going back to the games for the kids, is quite often we'll give them games which we think are amazing. We've created this amazing game, which is do this, and they play it, and there's some okay outcomes. If you just threw them a ball and say set up a game, they'd never play that game. Just probably too many rules, too many points that they've got to. They just want to play the simple game. I mean, that's why they like to play the game that kids like to play. And you're not allowed to call it these days. Certainly in literature, is what we used to call in the very old day British Bulldogs. I don't know if there's the Australian equivalent.
They call it bull rush over here.
Yeah, bull rush.
Yeah.
And the kids absolutely love it.
And yeah, and it's quite interesting you say that, because the boys don't ask me anymore, but we used to just do a bit of two-hand touch, or because I don't like conventional touch rugby, so I always change the rules around. And I'll always get one kid go, "Can I kick it?" And I'll go, "Did I say you couldn't?" And he goes, "Okay." And then he doesn't kick it. He just wanted to know if he could kick it. And as soon as you go, "Yes," then he thinks and goes, "Oh, I'm not going to." So, yeah, it's because, like you said, they just want something simple, but they want to know what they can and can't do. No, that's really...
Oh, yeah.
How do you think we can or can we improve the game? How do we change the game and improve the game as coaches at the grassroots level?
Well, is that like we need to change it fundamentally, or do we need to just, with our own teams, change the game?
Probably, I know fundamentally we probably can't, but can we change? Do we have much influence over the game and how it's going to change in the higher levels by what we do at the levels that we coach? Or how can we get our athletes ready to change the game? Like, the game will change, probably doesn't change a lot, but can we do anything to help our athletes change? Because for me, I think we play too much structured rugby. But how do we change that in the grassroots level, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, not that I'm a fan of structured rugby, but maybe structured rugby is the way to go. So we can't be the arbiters of whether we should play structured or unstructured rugby. We should let the players play the rugby that they want to play, and they may want to end up playing structured rugby. There are certainly enough players who will want to make fewer decisions on the pitch. They want to know what they need to do, because they don't want to be pulled over the coals for saying you've made the wrong decision there. I want to come along. I enjoy my rugby. We, as human beings, we have two traits. We want to learn because we want to be better, but also we want to be certain that we're right. So if you're told you're wrong, you lose a little bit of your confidence, your self-esteem, but also you want to be able to turn around and people say, well, this is the better way of doing it. And therefore there's a balance there. I mean, I prefer less structured rugby myself, so I'm probably more towards you, but I also know that doesn't always win cups, win games. I think the challenge at the moment is to ask ourselves, why do players play rugby?
Yep.
And what do they really enjoy about playing the rugby? And some of them do love the structure. They love being in structure. They love things working out. They like the fact that everything's moved into alignment and we've achieved that. And they may happen once or twice in the game. Other players don't like that straitjacket. They want to be more their own player and do what they want. Now, that can work in some cases, but in other cases, it's very much about them and what they want to do. So we've got to have a balance on that. We've got to let the players enjoy their experiences, because that will keep them in the game. I think that we've got two things here. We've got two columns working here. We've got players who are going to play into their 20s and 30s, we hope, enjoying the game, making grassroots rugby happen. And then we've got audience going to watch matches, watching television, seeing what's going on. And the players who are on television have got a different duty. They've got to stop thinking about, this is definitely an opinion, and I'm willing to be shot down. They've got to stop thinking about winning games at all costs and start thinking about winning games where they're enjoying winning. They're playing games which are fast, physical, aggressive, but also fluid. TMO is killing the game.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that these are big decisions, but TMO, there should be a 30-second limit, and I'm going to go with your on-field decision unless I can see anything different. Nope, gone. Because if you're in the crowd, it kills the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, another problem is the problem of foul play. And this is also killing the game. It's not that we should be soft on high tackles. Absolutely not. It is the player's responsibility to work harder to get lower in the tackle, but also it's the responsibility of players not to get themselves into position to be high tackled. So if you are dipping into contact, you'll get a chance of being high tackled. Now, if we are coaches, we tend to say, when you're carrying the ball, generally move the ball to space or attack space, because that's how you go forward in rugby.
Yep.
If you're intending to run through a player, well, if you dip down, you're creating a bigger, better body shape, but you're also going to be high tackled. So there's a responsibility from the tackler. It's got to get lower. Absolutely. Number one, they've got to get lower. But if we're going to play that sort of rugby, then we're going to have those incidences. And that's slowing the game down at the top level. It does not make it a spectacle to watch, because the game just does not move. I was at a women's game, Bristol Bears versus Harlequins ladies, or women's team. I can't remember quite the name. I think it's Harlequin Women's. And there were several occasions when there was a driving maul. The crowd loved it. Because they could see that the ball was advancing, things are happening, and that's good. So there are lots of aspects of the game which are exciting. Standing around waiting for a decision is not. And players who want to offload, that's good. But there are more ways to play the game than some people say, be more like Fiji. Well, be more like Fiji if you've got players who have got those handling skills. Be more like the team that you are and play the best brand of rugby that you can play. Don't be a team which thinks they can be one way when you need to be another. I mean, frankly, the best rugby to watch from the early 80s was the Australian touring team when they had the Ella brothers and it was absolutely the most amazing rugby to watch, the way that they wanted to play the game. And they did it all. They were aggressive, moved the ball, they kicked a bit, did things. It doesn't mean you need to do scorpion kicks and funny chips all the time. You need to have the full range, play a brand of rugby where you enjoy playing the best that you can play, and if you happen to be winning, that's great. But don't. I mean, the Lions tour of South Africa was the grimmest, and I mean, frankly, the Lions tour of New Zealand was grim, and actually, the Lions tour of Australia was grim because they just played in a way that they were going to grind out a Lions victory. There was some moments of magic, but generally, it just wasn't that exciting in terms of rugby spectacle. If you weren't invested in the Lions or you weren't invested in the national team, then I don't think you would have switched on to watch it.
I didn't watch any game of the South African Lions tour.
You didn't miss out.
I think I watched the highlights of the first game and turned them off and went, I'm not going to get up at stupid o'clock in the middle of the night to watch a game that I've got no interest in. That's not going to be exciting. Just on.
But if you want to have a game that excites you, one of the best games to watch is the 2003 New Zealand versus Wales game. What a game of rugby! I mean, you can tell the story. You can say, if you can sell the story to your players that New Zealand, best team in the world at the time, packed full of superb players. Wales had an awful tournament. The coach picks his also rounds to play in the game because they need some game time, knowing they're going to lose. And it turns into one of the great games just because of the way it was played. It had jeopardy, it had skills. In the end, New Zealand won, but just the way it was played was absolutely fantastic. And you've got to tell stories. You've got to get people invested in what they're playing. The reasons we will be effective as coaches is if the players are loving being part of a group of other people who are sharing experiences, and they're sharing experiences during matches, changing rooms, in the stupid things which happen in the clubhouse, on buses, someone slipping over, the stories that they tell. And that's not created because you create 4 drinking games or they dress up stupidly on a Sunday after a game. It's created because the characters within it enjoy playing hard, working hard, going through a little bit of adversity. We can maybe call it, in video game terms, a bit of unnecessary difficulties together. And then they come out of it and say, yeah, I remember that game. I remember when we played this. Some of my favorite moments as a coach might be when I watched my son's team win games when we turned up just 15 minutes before the kickoff. This is maybe under 15s. The other team had been there warming up for an hour or so. 3 or 4 of the players had been on a sleepover, which would mean they're better about 1 hour of sleep. And they went out and they played the most amazing sort of rugby that they'd ever played, won the game, and they will always remember that. And they'll remember the stories around it just as much as the way that they played. And well, there we are. That's the stuff that you meet up and have a beer and remember your yesterdays, and you were a lot better then.
Yeah.
Than you really were.
A lot thinner and more hair, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
No, that's really good, Dan. Giving feedback to your players. There's a whole heap of ways around giving feedback. What's your preferred method, or the method that you've found works? And I'll give that as a caveat of you may have to give different feedback to different players within your team. Some like the big stick and the little carrot, and some like the big carrot and the little stick. But as a collective, so if you're giving during a training session, you were giving collective feedback to the group rather than individual player feedback. What's the best way you've found to give that feedback? So you've been playing a game or an activity, and you've just stopped to cover something that you've seen. Might be, a correction or changing something. What's the best way you've found to give feedback to a larger group? rather than individuals.
Yeah, I think you need to understand that the intention is that it probably won't make a difference in the way that you probably thought it would, because not everyone's listening. So really the feedback is changing the direction of the energy or enhancing the energy. So if something's gone really well, you're saying, say, well done, let's keep that going, capture that. And if things aren't going right, say, right, we need to change direction here, or you need to work harder at that. And that is then really you've got to hand over the reins to them to change what's happening. So to do it effectively, you say, right, this has gone well. What can we do better? Just get into your groups and just focus on what you can do better, and let's see what happens. I think we can ask a big question, and one or two people put their hands up and give the answer, and it's not that effective, really. You're engaging a couple of people. Quite like the idea of the cold calling way of doing things, where you say, right, this is the question I'm going to ask, and I'll ask somebody to answer this in about 15-20 seconds. So in that last game, we were working on, say, attacking so we could create some space. So just from your own point of view, what did you do to help that happen? But I'm going to ask anybody that question. So think about it for 15-20 seconds. So the question is, what did you do to help create space? So anyone, I could ask anyone. And you're quiet for a bit, and then you say, all right, okay, I'm going to ask anybody. And then you just turn around, you say, Bully, what did you think? And you knew that question was coming your way, or it's going to come to someone. You might think, oh shit, I hope it doesn't come to, oh, sugar, I hope it's not going to come to me. And it does come to you. And then you have to manage that, because you may not come up with an answer. It says, sorry, Dan, I don't know. And you can maybe nudge you towards an answer because you've spotted something. Or alternatively, you say, okay, Bully, well, I'll come back to you in a moment. I'm going to ask somebody else. And then you come back and say, how does that? And they may say, yeah, I tried to square up a bit better. And you might say, okay, Bully, so why did Dan say that? And then so that there engages two players, but it's engaged everybody for 15 seconds because they've been worried that they could have been having to answer the question. But large group feedback is generally stopping something, ready to move on to something else. It's saying we're changing direction, or it is just enhancing the energy. And you are moving your group, stopping the group, restarting something else, moving the group forward faster, or just slightly changing the direction of the group. And that's where I think your feedback is coming in. But you are probably looking around the group at the same time, trying to judge what's going on. You know if they've worked hard, if they're slightly red-cheeked, breathless, or they're really on you, or they may be thinking, can I go get some water? As soon as they say get some water, you know that they're not concentrating. That's often a proxy for. I mean, you need water when you think you need water, but if you're really involved in the game, you don't think you need water. You probably do need it, but don't starve them of water.
Yeah, of course.
By the way.
Because I always find the guys I've got now don't even utter the word, but it's always like, so what do you think we can do better? Oh, our comms.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like, okay, what comms are we talking about? And so they don't even go to, because they know if they say comms, I'm going to go, what do you mean by comms? Like, are you directive comms? Are you talking, listening, all this? And then they just go, oh, now we're getting all too hard. We're just going to find something else. But it tends to be the go-to answer if they don't know is, oh, our comms could be better.
And I've changed my questions now to avoid that one now, because I'm quite specific. Instead, I'm not asking what we need to improve. I'm trying to be more specific with my question to make them, we were focusing on this. Or say, if we were focusing on this, what do we need to change? Now, if they then say communication, I can drill down and say, okay, so if you're saying communication, what is that going to help us to do that? I know, right, okay. So you've said it, let's action it.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes it is the issue as well. That, like if you're doing defence stuff or, but yeah, no, that's good, mate. I really appreciate this, mate. This has been really great. Just one last question to finish off. If you could go back in a time machine to when you first started coaching, as in that all those years ago, what piece of advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
There's probably some very trite or silly answers to that, which I can come up with. I think when you look back on what you were at in 1994, the scariest thing that you can do is to think that you know so little. You'd never walk onto the pitch. You'd look at yourself and say, you're ridiculous. So I think that my advice would be to my 1994 coaching self, and which is when I really seriously was taking teams, is keep doing what you're doing and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because what will happen is that if you enjoying it, you'll want to get better.
Yeah.
So it's like someone said to me that your mind creates a conceit that life is okay, because you could be driving in a car, and as you're driving in the car, there's so many things that could go wrong. You could be hit by a lorry, meteor, anything could happen. So what your mind does, it takes away all those scary things to a certain extent and keeps you going. Now, the analogy is that if you're walking, you can walk along a plank along the ground and not fall off it without any problems. If you put it over a pit of crocodiles, then suddenly you find it extremely difficult to walk along because you are so aware of everything around you. So if I go back to 1994, just say that coaching is very enjoyable most of the time. Keep doing what you're doing, and things will happen for you. I mean, there's definitely things I could have changed. Absolutely. We talked about it before. I said 10% of my coaching was probably okay. And of the 90% which I was doing, some of it was okay, but I didn't know why it was okay. And the rest of it I should have binned a long time ago. Some of it comes back, of course, in circles, becomes on trend again. But to any coach, if you're putting yourself in front of them, enjoy the energy, enjoy what you're doing, and just you change a little bit over time. Some coaches have some sort of St. Paul's Road to Damascus change, and they say, I used to be a drills-based coach, and now I'm a games-based coach, and it was this one moment I saw it and it changed. And I think that may be a change in terms of what you're doing on the field. More importantly, you've changed because you enjoy coaching, you enjoy the process of coaching, you enjoy seeing players improve, and you're just trying to make yourself the best version. And if it happens that you do it by talking more than others or talking less than others, then so be it.
No, that's some good advice, mate. Yeah, and I think we all change over time. We evolve over time, I think. No, that's really good. Mate, this has been awesome. I've got a heap of notes here, and I'm sure the listeners will take some good points away from this. I always say to guys I talk to, if you talk to 100 coaches and you take one thing away from every coach, you know 100 new things. So, no, it's been really good, mate. Thank you so much for your time. And so, you in season at the moment, or are you winding up?
We're actually just out of season now. A few end of term dinners and some sort of bit of off season work rugby wise. So that's good now. But from a work point of view, everyone's always playing rugby somewhere around the world. So it's good to talk coaching every single day.
Yeah, and I'll put all the links to all your websites and all that in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to reach out and contact you, all the information will be there.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to
no problem
ramble on. It's a good reflective journey in itself. Answering these questions, so I need to listen back and make sure that I carry through, follow through on some of the things I'm saying. People say, well, you said this on the podcast, but when you come to coaching, you do something different. So yes, it's been great. So thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you very much, mate. I took a lot out of that. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Move off their own ball. That is monstrous.